Welcome to Biztechasia, Asia's hottest startup show. Our hot startup today is watchTowr. And with us today is Benjamin Harris, CEO of watchTowr, a hot cybersecurity startup based out of Singapore, with a different view on how to battle bad actors via its watchTowr platform, which is a continuous attack surface management solution. To tell us more, welcome to the show, Ben.
Hi, Brian. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very thrilled to talk about watchTowr, and yeah, pleasure to be here.
Okay, but for a start, Ben, tell us about watchTowr and its journey from inception to where you are today.
Absolutely. So with watchTowr, it's really the child, I think, of many, many years of experience in the consulting world, helping big banks, governments, insurance understand how they're going to be targeted by real adversaries. With the watchTowr platform, what we're really trying to do is build technology that helps these large organizations understand in real time how they could get compromised so that they can respond and proactively defend themselves. This is what makes our technology really, really exciting. It's designed to help these organizations keep up with the rapid change in cybersecurity.
Okay, so now, Ben, I want to give the audience a sense of who Ben Harris is. Because yes, you're only 28 years old, but you really have started out in this game really early on. Tell us a little bit about your start in technology and how that was a deviation from music.
Absolutely. So as my father loves to colloquially put it, I had a very misspent childhood with computers. Many nights not really doing much work or not doing much of my kind of music practice as my parents would have loved me to have done, but just spent diving into computers and understanding how they worked. In life, sometimes you have callings, right? Sometimes there are things that are inevitable. And I would suggest that cybersecurity for me has always been a bit of a calling. So when I left school at 17, there was no real other option for me. It was pretty much, let's just go straight into cybersecurity consulting and see if I can find something that's productive with this knowledge that I kind of built in that misspent youth.
But in your misspent youth, you also had companies, right? You were doing consulting even then at 12 years old or 13, am I right?
Correct. I mean, my father took a very much view that if I wanted to have any kind of pocket money, I should earn it myself. And therefore, taking it very literally, I think I started a couple of web hosting businesses at the time. That was being back in early 2000s. So I've always had a deep interest for cybersecurity, but also that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, has always kind of pushed through me.
Okay, now I want to talk about watchTowr. And so you're just over a year old now. Tell us about the business itself and what the footprint is like in the region.
Absolutely. So I think as a business being based in Southeast Asia, the last year has been amazing for us. Obviously, cybersecurity and the increased kind of the threat landscape that we keep seeing evolve has really begun to kind of set into the world. With that, we've really pushed our technology into the hands of clients we think can get benefit from using our technology to help them defend themselves. So we work with big organizations in the banking sector, financial services, the fintech sector, insurance, to really help them understand that historically, where they've used consultancies to kind of answer this question, to get point-in-time answers on their cybersecurity posture, we can help them with technology now, really understand in real time what they look like to an attacker.
Can you break it down for us in English? You're an expert in this, but a lot of the audience are watching us are decision makers, but they want to understand what you're actually doing. Break it down for us in really simple terms.
So with our technology, what we're effectively doing is using data and automation to finally give big organizations a real-time view of how they could get compromised. So by literally simulating the same tactics and techniques that people like the North Koreans might use to break into a large bank when they're trying to kind of gain financial access. So we've built three primary pieces of technology. One part that performs what we call reconnaissance. It maps out organizations and builds a very clear, comprehensive picture of what that organization looks like on the internet. Our second piece of technology then tests everything we discover for high impact vulnerabilities. So the types of vulnerabilities that you see organizations make the news for is exactly what we look for across our technology in our data when helping protect these organizations. And then, of course, we provide all that information in a reporting format that aligns both to regulatory standards, like the Monetary Authority of Singapore or the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, and at the same time enables and empowers C-levels and boards to really understand their organization's posture.
So this is very interesting, Ben, because traditionally, wouldn't we need to hire consultants to come in and do threat testing and the like?
Exactly. And this is one of the challenges. So if we think about the cybersecurity landscape as we see it today, things move so quickly. You see it, I see it every day. There's a new breach in the news. We've seen numerous high-profile breaches in the last few weeks, and we see attackers upskilling themselves every single day. Like you mentioned, in the old world, you would have consultants that came in once a year. Mr. Bank, we've tested you for 2 weeks this year, and you're looking C out of, I don't know, on an A to E scale, right? We'll come back next year and tell you how you look then. The challenge is that by the time that information, that report has even been delivered, attackers have upskilled themselves, the threat landscape has changed, and ultimately has invalidated all the tests that have happened. So with watchTowr, what we're really trying to do is say, okay, point in time, that once a year assessment with a consultant doesn't really reflect how adversaries target organizations. Let's build a continuous process that can ingest the evolutions of the threat landscape, the evolutions of how adversaries target organizations, so the testing organizations get is both realistic and relevant.
And that's really crucial because, as you said, and as all of us understand right now, the threat from cybersecurity has just gone to a completely different level in the last 2 years. But I want to ask you this, where are the bad actors coming from? You mentioned North Korea just now. Is that something that has been going on for a while? People talk about China, people talk about hackers from the US. I mean, give us a sense of where these coordinated attacks and all are coming from, and obviously the financial benefits associated with that.
It's a really, really interesting question. And I think there's a couple of kind of layers to that answer. What we've seen in the last 10 years is a major shift in how cyber has been used by both nation states, but also crime groups. So I think if you look back 20 years ago, hacking was something that children got arrested for, playing too much with computers, and typically seen as kind of a nefarious, mischievous behavior. But as time has changed, what's really become interesting is that we've seen nation states, organized crime, realize that they can make a lot of money, they can gain a lot of information by performing cyber attacks, which has driven the capability exponentially upwards. If we think about what's really changed and where these people come from, it's not necessarily a geographical location. It's more about the resourcing behind these attacks that's now changed and become significantly greater. It's the motivation. If you're a nation state and you have interest in country B, there is no limit on the resource available to what they'll use to break in or gain that information. That might not apply to every organization. If I'm a bakery sat in ASEAN, my concern probably isn't that nation state actor who might be targeting, I don't know, confidential information, geopolitically sensitive information. But if I'm a bank, I'm an insurer, where I have a critical piece or critical point in a country's economy, if a compromise of bank A would result in instability for a country's economy or a wider region's economy, that's interesting to nation states, particularly when things heat up in less peaceful times, for lack of a better phrase.
Now, let me talk about then what you just said in terms of organized crime, organized group, and organized crime, seeing this obviously as a revenue opportunity on a global scale. And all they need to do is basically have a distributed team across the world, hire them, and basically go out and ransomware and basically hold companies across the world for hostage. Do you have a sense of what sort of numbers are like in terms of ransomware attacks? Because that's increasing dramatically.
You're exactly right. And we're seeing this with the customers that come and talk to us about the watchTowr platform. The big concern, the big driver of security awareness and security concern has been ransomware. It's been the most visible impact of a cyber attack in the last 10 years. But at the same time, the easiest way for attackers to monetize those cyber attacks at the same time. So the impact of ransomware has grown tremendously. And it's what's really interesting is that in the last 2-3 years, we've seen attackers blat or target entire geopolitical sensitivities. They've targeted entire industries, and they've begun to learn who will pay, who will not pay, who cares if they get targeted by ransomware, who doesn't care. And so in the last 12 months, we've seen something really, really interesting. While ransomware attacks have decreased globally, ransomware attacks on financial services, so banks, insurance, fintech, have increased 252%. So if we read into that data, what we can basically extrapolate is that perhaps attackers are realizing that big whale hunting, as we call it in the industry, targeting those that have resource behind them, have regulator focus, are likely to have cyber insurance policies that will pay out for a ransomware attack, make for a better return on investment in their time. So we joke about kind of organized crime, organized groups, but it truly is incredibly organized. At the watchTowr platform, with watchTowr platform, this is what we're trying to help organizations with. If you're being targeted by someone who is incredibly motivated, if they know there's a payday of $5 million at the end of an attack, how can you simulate that persistence, that aggression, that willingness to spend a huge amount of time to compromise your organization? Like you mentioned, historically, we've tried to use consultants for that, but that doesn't reflect that nature and that real world as we see it today. So the watchTowr platform, we simulate, we replicate that aggression, that persistence to find the same vulnerabilities that people are using to deploy ransomware attacks.
So again, if I'm a CIO, this is really part of my new cybersecurity strategy. I basically have solutions and a team around, and it's really like, if you think about Formula One, you have a test team. So this is your test team. Your test team is running simulations all the time. I'm quickly learning, and then the feedback loop goes into the actual production team.
Exactly. Imagine at the same time, though, those simulations, what you have to simulate changes every single day. The challenge we face as an industry in cybersecurity is that there is a talent shortage. This is widely discussed, it's widely understood that we do not have enough people in the industry to kind of solve the ever-changing threat landscape, adversary attacks and techniques evolution, etc. This is really what we're trying to solve with the watchTowr platform. If things change so quickly, you have limited resource in your business, how can we use data to actually help you scale that understanding and make sure that things are efficient, you are on top of how things change, as opposed to calling expensive consultants who, once they leave, aren't any help to your organization.
Now, Ben, looking ahead with all of these threats, what's the outlook for cybersecurity and the cybersecurity landscape in the next 12 to 24 months? Where do you see the bad actors targeting, and what are the responses that you think industry should take?
Absolutely. So I think obviously looking far into the future is always a tough thing to do, but I think we can look at a few things that are happening globally in the world, and we can then translate that to what typically will happen to crime and then cybercrime. So I think there's a lot of information, statistics out there that typically suggest that once economies begin to go into recession, once markets and macro environments don't look as positive as they used to do, this has historically led to an uptick in what we call blue collar / financial crime. I believe we're going to see the same shift in cyber, where things will go from being kind of out of interest to far more financially motivated, likely through further proliferation of ransomware. At the same time, I think we're seeing numerous geopolitical events happening at the moment, where we're finally beginning to see the real world public execution and usage of a real cyber military capability. So in the next 12-24 months, what we're likely to see is how industry ingests this new reality. If countries are now being more comfortable to leverage that capability in times of less than peace, we should probably be understanding as an industry or as a private sector how we can help these organizations react to that new reality. I think at the same time as well, we will continue to see the evolution of ransomware, how that impacts organizations, how adversaries are using ransomware to target organizations, and this will drive organizations to understand how they should protect themselves. I like to believe, and this is what we are building towards with the watchTowr platform, that organizations will at some point need to go through a process of continuous testing. If we reflect on the fact that adversaries are now more and more aggressive, they are more motivated than ever, continuous testing will become a pivotal point of any organization's security program.
Now, Ben, I want to digress just slightly, because I want to talk about the impact on nation states that you've alluded to several times during this conversation. Now, the impact on nation states can be twofold. One is politics. And so there've obviously been a lot of, there was a lot of chatter around the influence that Russia had on getting Donald Trump elected, for example. And obviously, nation states will seek to influence outcomes with their adversaries. The other thing is also, of course, in the defense sector and cybersecurity now and cyber warfare as such is becoming front and center, particularly because of the Ukraine war. Tell us about how this really is going to, it looks like it's going to be evolving in the coming years.
I think it's a very fair question. And I think we're very lucky to say that most governments aren't surprised by this involvement. So to give you some context, in my previous lives, previous roles before starting watchTowr, we used to do a lot of work with what we call regulatory-led engagements, where you'd have massive government entities that would talk to industries and effectively ask them to run simulations. These would typically be industries that had critical national importance: the finance sector, utilities, energy, transport. And these simulations were really around if bad actor came from country A, if there was a compromise of this organization or that particular part of the industry, how can we limit a systemic impact on a country's economy or a country's ability to operate? Given that there's been that kind of focus historically, and that's really been going for the last 10 years in many, many different countries. We see it in Singapore, we see it in Hong Kong, we see it in the UK, we see it in the US, we see it in mainland Europe as well. I believe we're going to see an increased focus on these types of simulations, especially now that board level attention is grabbed. Historically, I think there's been a little bit of questioning around whether these simulations were realistic. Did they represent a realistic threat? Would this ever actually happen? But as you mentioned, current geopolitical events are really making sure there's zero doubt left in people's minds. These events are very real. They are very possible. To pull this back to really what we're trying to do at watchTowr, even those simulations that the Bank of England or the MAS or the HKMA might kind of run with different parts of industry, they are point in time. They will do a simulation for 3 months out of the year, and they will use that 3 months to understand, are we at systemic risk or are we not at systemic risk? If we then counterbalance that with the reality that adversaries change constantly, what we might simulate in January to March might be completely different what's relevant to simulate in April to June. And so by leveraging a data-driven continuous testing approach like we're building with watchTowr, actually we can help these simulations, we can help organizations or entire industries prepare for these types of incidents in a continuous manner, as opposed to that kind of point, time and check, and then forget about it.
And so if I'm a CIO and I want to use a watchTowr type solution,
yeah.
What is your charge model? Is it a recurring revenue SaaS type thing, or is it a single project that you basically implement?
So I personally believe in building very strong partnerships with organizations. We want to work with them over the long term and ensure that we really do help them build security posture and really reinforce confidence in an organization's cybersecurity posture. I think we always forget that cybersecurity is not about how the internal stakeholder feel, but how does the external stakeholder feel? How do my suppliers feel, my customers feel, whether they be B2B or B2C? Do they trust that my data is being held securely? Do they trust the organizations I work with themselves are doing the right things to be held securely? So we've built watchTowr and our kind of commercial model for the watchTowr platform around those partnerships and building partnerships. We do yearly subscription models where we can give organizations yearly continuous testing, and we typically sign multi-year deals to ensure that we grow with the organization and really help them improve, strengthen, and demonstrate that security posture.
Now, I want to zoom in then on the company itself, watchTowr. From a financial standpoint, you raised $8 million in a pre-Series A investment round in July. You have big name investors like Process Ventures, which is basically most people know as Nespers, who owned biggest shareholders in Tencent. Vulcan Capital, another big name, and also Wavemaker Partners, which is also a very reputable firm. Tell us about how you've been able to raise capital so quickly as a young firm, and how you plan to utilize these funds.
Absolutely. So I think we're incredibly lucky to have the support and backing by Process, Vulcan, and Wavemaker. And as partners, they've been absolutely fantastic so far. I think they have a very clear vision on the future and aligned to our vision on the future as well. As technology, as digitization really begins to kind of improve and extrapolate, increase in speed over the next decade, cybersecurity will be the thing that underpins this growth, this change in the world. If we can enable organizations to make cybersecurity easy, to keep up with how things change and to really reflect the evolution of how cybersecurity has changed in the last 10 years, that's a good thing for the world. And so I believe that, well, Vulcan Capital, Process, and Wavemaker have bought into the vision that we have to really make cybersecurity and strengthening posture continuous very, very possible. From our perspective, raising the funds was a fantastic vote of confidence. And of course, off the back of tremendous growth in the business over the last 12 months, we've been very lucky to acquire clients in what I would call our target industries: banking, insurance, financial services. But at the same time as well, we're very conscious that there is a wider market that we have yet to approach and yet to really dive into. We're using the funds to really strengthen the product, push and make sure that we can handle more and more data, while at the same time still keeping up with the rate of change that we see across the kind of threat landscape. What happens next? Who knows? But I think from our perspective, there's a clear kind of multinational expansion in the works, and we will see where we get to, and I think in mid next year. But I think, put in summary, it's a very exciting time. We're very excited to be able to invest in our technology more and ensure that the clients we're working with and our future clients really gain access to continuous security testing and full attack surface visibility.
Now, Ben, I want to focus a little bit on you, because as we talked about in the beginning of the show, you have a very unique background. What are some of the lessons that you've learned previously and also during your watchTowr experience that you'd like to share with fellow entrepreneurs?
Very tough question, because I don't consider myself a role model at all. In fact, far from it. And I don't know whether anyone should ever take any advice from the lessons I've gone through in life. But I think to answer more succinctly, I think it's to follow your passion. If you love something, if you enjoy it, if everything you do revolves around that passion, it doesn't become work. It becomes a very enjoyable process where you can build something and see a vision really come to effect. My recommendation to anyone looking to kind of do the same thing or jump into the same path: do it sooner rather than later. There's never a better time. There's never a good time, but there's always excitement. And the one thing I say to a lot of my friends and colleagues, in the last 12 months, we've achieved and built more and had better, I think, more fulfilling outcomes than I had in the last 12 years of my kind of corporate career. So from my perspective, it's a truly a mission driven by passion. And I always encourage people to kind of be driven by what gets them out of bed every day.
Now, Ben, final question. What final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before you end the conversation?
I think it's just a stark reality, I think, that I've kind of alluded to, but I think we as a world need to be truly aware of. Cybersecurity isn't a challenge that we can solve. It's not a true or false problem. It's a growing challenge. And I was recently talking to some CEOs from a number of Singaporean businesses about this. If you look at how you measure risk in the financial markets and the insurance world, you have models that go back many, many years and give you an indication of how the future will look. With cyber, it's very different. Because it changes so quickly, we're very, very quickly learning, and the insurers are learning this as well. Previous models of how cyber attacks look or how the cyber landscape looks don't translate to the future. If I was talking to big organizations right now and asking them kind of to reflect on the reality, whatever we're doing today isn't going to be effective tomorrow. We have to constantly improve how we look at ourselves from a cybersecurity perspective to ensure that we are really reflecting how adversaries target organizations and not looking at how adversaries target organizations yesterday or the week before. This is really what we're trying to do at watchTowr. I'm trying to help organizations understand that cybersecurity isn't static. We can't just test and know where we are. We have to test again tomorrow and the day after and the day after to really make sure that how does my organization fare from a cybersecurity perspective today in today's threat landscape.
Ben, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Brian. Likewise, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Benjamin Harris, CEO and founder of watchTowr, on Biztechasia's hottest startup show. This show is part of our media partnership with the Singapore Business Show 2022. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks for tuning in.